Welcome to the Executive Coaching Podcast, where Executive Coach Alicia Cowan will discuss leadership topics and coaching solutions to tackle the most difficult problems that keep you from leading your team to success.
Hi, it's Alicia Cowan, and it's wild to say that this is episode number 13 of this podcast. We are currently recording this in May of 2023, and right now the vibe around the Cowan household is very much targeted towards and focusing on like the end of the school year for us. So exciting, and can't believe it went by so quick. And really, the last few weeks and days of school are upon us, and my focus is definitely on the summer and summer fun and what is on the bucket list for the summer. So, a fun thing that we have coming up next weekend is headed to Universal Studios. And my sister is coming in for the weekend, and we are going to go to both parks at Universal to see everything Harry Potter. Through the school year, we've been listening to all the Harry Potter books on Audible, and now we are wrapping up the last one, and we've never been to the park and seen all of the Harry Potter rides and attractions and all the things. So we're going to do all of that this coming weekend. So I'll report back as always. So really headed into the back half of the year. And with that, I've been diving into some different topics around leading yourself as an executive. And I've been lucky to be a part of some really great groups. And one group that I'm a part of is this really great women's group. And one of the topics that came up, I'm going to talk about today. And it was the topic of, can you be grateful for where you're at as an executive or C-suite leader and still have big goals and go for the next big thing at the same time? And that question came up because I think, when you get to a certain level within the organization or a certain title that you've achieved, that you worked so hard for your entire career, perhaps, to get to that level, there comes a sense of arrival. And with it comes a whole new set of questions and potentially concerns and questions that you have around your achievement and what's next. And so we're going to dive in and talk a little bit about that today. But I think the current feeling could potentially be overwhelming, could be like a little bit of confusion, could be feeling conflicted, right? And I want to help move through that and kind of shift and maybe give you some questions to ask yourself and give you some coaching to think potentially just a way to unpack some of that overwhelm and some of that confusion to shift into potentially at least into a state of like a willingness to look at it a little bit differently, to be a little bit more introspective and maybe curious about why you're thinking some of the thoughts and normalizing it a little bit rather than I think at times we beat ourselves up over it. So making sure that nothing's gone wrong when you get to this level and you get to this point of your career. And while it's normal, I think to understand too, and to help again, unpack some of the layers of it, because a lot of the times what's driving some of this is the fear and the scarcity mindset that creeps up on us time to time. And I talked about this before, but it a lot of times it's this like fear and scarcity that again loves to disguise itself with these altruistic thoughts that sound really great, but sometimes they hold us back and they keep us really safe and keep us from taking action. And today we're going to talk about like, how do you discern between the two? How do you make sure that you can understand how you're thinking and why you're thinking the way that you are? So let's talk a little bit about like what this may sound like, and maybe you can identify with some of this. So what I've heard is when you get to and ascend to a certain level, some of the thoughts that we have that keep us from like going to the next big thing is, thoughts that sound like, I've worked so hard to get here, right? Like I've dreamed and, accomplished and just been grinding, right? Just to get to this level. But in the same time, it's not necessarily what I expected or what I anticipated once I got here. And also, shouldn't I be grateful? Right? Shouldn't I be grateful that I've quote unquote arrived at this level. And I want to unpack a couple of things there for you. Sometimes if we're thinking and giving ourselves these thoughts of like, but I should be, right? First off, anything that has a should in it, be wary of it, right? Sometimes we give these shoulds and we give ourselves these rules and these manuals of how we think we should behave once we get to a certain level. And the immediate trigger should be like, well, why? Start to question, like, why am I telling myself I should feel a certain way? Another thought here is at times I think we have this either or thinking where it's like, I've achieved this and I've gotten to this certain level and I should be grateful, right? And on the other end of it, or should I go for more, right? There's this either or thinking, like, shouldn't I be grateful and just stay where I'm at? Or should I want more in my life, right? And it's this polarizing kind of binary thinking of like this either or and not and. And I think just again, just noticing that and pausing and questioning, why am I telling myself that I can only have one or the other? And potentially examine like whose voice is that? Who is telling me? Potentially, if there is some belief that we're holding, is it someone within our life that might have told us that, right? Is this truly my voice and my thinking? Or is it something that has been picked up over time, potentially from, a mentor or a parent or a peer or a spouse, whatever it may be? Like, is this truly my voice? And why am I thinking that I have to have either or? Another concept I want to talk about when we're thinking about just this either or, I worked so hard to get here and shouldn't I be grateful, is to think there is also this concept at times that we have is that once we get to a certain place, again, so it could be a certain title, it could be having a certain thing, certain level of income, whatever it may be in our career, right? We get to a certain place and we have this belief that once we get there, once we have the thing, that we're just supposed to be happy all the time, right? And I think we truly believe in anytime, if you really unpack things that we want in our careers or just generally in our lives, usually the wanting of the thing is not necessarily having the thing, the title, the pay, whatever it may be. For sure, that is great and nice, but it is always rooted back into how we think we're going to feel once we have the thing, right? So whether that be pride, accomplishment, right? Like happiness, typically always rooted back to happiness. But we think once we have that thing, we should just feel great all the time. And that is another point that trips us up, is that we truly believe that we should just be happy and not accepting this fact that once we get that thing, once we have that title, once we have that level of pay, once we've achieved that thing in our careers, it's still just 50-50. And I want to talk to you a little about that concept and unpack it. But again, once we achieve the thing, we think we're going to feel a certain way. But the reality of it is it's concept of 50-50, meaning that life is 50% of the time amazing and it's great and it's lovely and wonderful. And 50% of the time, it's not. And what I mean by that concept is, again, this could be even within a certain day or a certain season of our life, but there's certain things that go, what do we quote unquote, well in our day or our life or our week. And there's certain things that are issues or challenges for us, or times that we just don't feel so great. And when we get to that certain level and things aren't just 100% great all the time, and we're not just feeling amazing all the time, sometimes we trip ourselves up by thinking that means something's gone wrong, right? That once we get to that level and we're still like, I'm still a little dissatisfied in this portion of my life, or I still, feel a little bit unfulfilled. And why am I not happy all the time, right? That piece of the equation starts to trip us up because we get into this mindset that things should be great. And there's the should again, but they should be great. I should just feel happy all the time once I've achieved this thing. And a lot of times we want to argue with reality. I've had this discussion with lots of different people at times. They argue with the fact that no, the goal is to feel great all the time. And I would argue the fact that that's not necessarily the reality of what's going to happen in our lives, we're just not necessarily built to feel 100% great all the time. You think about, certain times where there are certain situations where we don't want to feel great. I know that sounds odd, but you think about maybe loss of a loved one or, something of that nature that impacts us, where because of that situation, we don't want to feel happy in that moment. And we argue with reality that we should feel happy all the time. And there's certain times where we want to feel grief or we want to feel sadness, and layering on another piece of something's gone wrong when we don't feel that way. And again, I know this is kind of an extreme situation or example that I'm talking about, but when we're equating that back to our careers and we think just because we've gotten to a certain level that, something's gone wrong if we don't feel great all the time, we have to think to ourselves, is that the reality of what really is going to occur in our lifetime? Okay. So I know I'm going off on a tangent, but I think that when we think about, again, I've worked so hard to get here, and shouldn't I be grateful? And why is it not exactly what I expected? Again, notice if part of that layer is I'm expecting myself to just feel amazing once I've achieved this level of my career all the time, right? Am I giving myself another layer of guilt or, another feeling of again, expectation of a should, putting it on myself of life should just be perfect once I've achieved this thing. And why don't I feel great all the time? And just so happy that I've made it. Okay. So I'll talk about, again, some concepts around what do we do now that we know that here towards the end. But let's talk about the second piece. Another concept that, may be tripping us up, or maybe a thought process that may be tripping us up, is the thought of maybe hearing, just keep your head down. You've achieved this level of success. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep working. Keep things status quo. Don't necessarily disrupt the apple cart, right? And a lot of times with that underlying thought, right, if you can even feel it, it feels kind of like a scolding mentality, right? It feels like it's coming from a place of scarcity. A lot of times us as leaders, some of us are quote unquote self-made, right? We came from, we believe are humble beginnings where we may not have seen this level of success within our family atmosphere or family life. And we may believe that like we've achieved more than we ever thought possible based on where we maybe grew up, how we got here, where we came from, right? And we feel this need and the scarcity, even though we come from humble beginnings, that now that I've made it, why risk it? Why dream bigger? Why keep going? Why keep pushing? Why keep dreaming of the next big thing and the big goal? Because shouldn't you just be happy and satisfied for staying staying exactly where you're at? And again, think about how that feels, right? Even just saying it, it sounds fearful, and like it comes from a place of scarcity. Now, I don't want to mislead you. I'm not saying that you need to blow it all up and completely destroy everything that you've built and how hard you worked. But I think just even noticing that when we put, again, these shoulds of like, we should be happy and just staying status quo because we're so fearful of what could happen if we continue to dream and risk, even how that feels, it feels limiting, right? Like we're trying to play small and like we're trying to even act as if we can control what the future holds. Reality is there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee even if we keep things status quo, even if we don't disrupt or dream bigger or, even change what we're doing today, there is absolutely no guarantee that we're going to stay exactly as is, right? There's no change that could come from it. And I think that times, again, that feeling of scarcity, we give this false sense of belief to the future that if we keep things the way that they are, that somehow that we have that control over our situation. And, that voice of just accept it, don't dream bigger, don't ask for more, be satisfied with where you're at. Because if you do dream bigger, potentially whoever they could take it away. Right. And if this sounds like you, and if you can identify with some of these thoughts, really ask yourself, do you like this reason? If you decide to listen to this thought, listen to these reasons, do you like that reason? And is those thoughts that I'm thinking about the future or about where I am currently, are they true? Can I prove them without any reasonable doubt that if I stay small, I keep things status quo, that things won't change, right? And notice if you like the reason of, again, staying small, playing it safe, and keeping things status quo. Do you like your reasoning? And if you do, again, by no means, I have no idea whether or not you should make the change or go for it or not. I have no idea whether or not you like that reason or not. All is totally fine, whether or not you decide to make the change or not. But just being super clear as you are reflecting and again, being a little bit more introspective. Do I like my reasoning? And does it feel good to me? I'll share one of my own stories here. I think for myself, a couple of the comments that I get from unnamed people in my life, I will say, as I've started to dream bigger and started to go for bigger things, I understand and I get that it is a complete, sometimes identity shift from who we were to who we are trying and aiming and going for the next phase of our life, who we are trying to be and become. And, as I try new things and experiment with, different goals that I have, I've often gotten messaging of things like, well, don't work too hard. And don't work, you're working a lot. You don't work too hard. Right. And just that subtle messaging of tying it back to like, well, don't overextend yourself or don't push too hard. But why? Right. And I think just really questioning that. And do I want to take that on, or even that, like, again, that mandate that I'm getting from other people in my life as they watch me go for bigger things, and again, I think it's good intentioned. I think it's, right. It comes from a nurturing, protective, mindset that they have, or that's what I choose to believe. But I have to really ask myself, does that align with how I feel and what I'm thinking and what I'm going after, right? Because at times, like that don't work too hard mandate that I get, sometimes says I don't feel like I'm working too hard, or I don't feel like I'm pushing too hard. I feel like I'm actually going after something that is so fulfilling and like energizing to me. And it may look like a lot of hard work from the outside to someone else. And I get it. I understand that. But I think at times people feel, again, I think from this point of view, it was very nurturing. But I think that even that, like, the thought of like, even that scarcity, right? Like, keep yourself safe, stay where you're at, be happy and satisfied with where you are at and what you're doing, and don't overextend, don't push, right? Where are those voices coming from? And how do you make sure that they're aligned with what you believe and what your own voice is for yourself? And at times it feels super awkward and super uncomfortable and super, I don't know, identity challenging when you decide to not listen to those voices, whether they be your own or somebody else's for you. So if those two kind of groups of thoughts that I kind of went through sound like you, let's talk about, what do you do, right? What do you do from there? And how do you know, and how do you discern whether or not they're ones that you want to keep or not? And I'll say that the first question, I think, is really exploring. And I think at times when we get to a point, again, of achievement, kind of midlife, right? And we're getting to the point where we've gotten a lot of what we wanted and what we've sought after. Again, whatever that may look like for you as an executive, we've achieved some things and we start to question. And I think at times, we need to give ourselves some pause as we head into summer. Some of us have some breaks, some relief, as we have a couple of summer vacations maybe coming up, or some time to ourselves where we can just think and ask ourselves, like, what do you feel really deeply called to do? And asking yourself that question, and then starting to just truly listen to your own voice. What is the calling for contribution that you have? And it could be something, again, could be something small, could be something major, but like, what is that voice inside of you that keeps coming back up, right? And I call it intuition. Sometimes it can be whatever religion you believe in, whatever higher power is speaking to you. But what is that calling that you feel called over and over again to do. And again, we may have to really listen, because sometimes we may be like buffering and listening to other thoughts, or some of these other thoughts that I talked about earlier in the podcast, but like some of that may be like trying to tamper that voice down. So you got to really listen. What keeps coming up for you? And notice the difference between some of our, I'll call them our garbagey thoughts, right? The garbagey thoughts that are coming through versus the true voice and the calling of what we're called to do. So how do I tell the difference between that? What's some exercises that we can do? So let me talk about that. So as a coach, I've, tried some different things. And one thing that I loved that I've done in my past is creating the list. And it's a perfect exercise for this when we're in this thought of like, should I feel grateful? Or do I feel like I want to go for more? Right. And when we're in that kind of like either or thinking, how do we make sure that we can blend both? So exercise, super simple. You can grab pen or paper or whatever medium of choice that you like, phone, blank notes app on your phone, whatever it may be, and start to think about two different things. One, making a list of the things that you already have, but are grateful for, and that you would re-choose again and again and again in your life, right? So it could be anything. It could be, again, the level of accomplishment within your career, your title, your salary, your home, car you drive, your family, your spouse, your significant other, your pets, whatever. Something that you have already that you're super grateful for. Alternate that on that list then with something that you want, a goal you have, a thing you want to achieve, something you want to possess, whatever that looks like. Alternate it with that next one with something that you don't have already. That is the goal for you. And just creating that list, something you have that you're grateful for, something that you want to achieve, goal you want to go after, right? Just keep alternating. And what's super cool and powerful about this is because you're looking at this list and you're feeling a sense of gratitude for the things that you have and that you would re-choose and you're so thankful for all day, every day, and you're alternating it with this thing that you may not have already, you're coming from this place of gratitude and you're having this, again, looking at these things and feeling grateful already. And what's neat about this is that I've done this exercise a couple of different times. What's really neat about this is you can start to like look and see if those things that you want in your future that you don't yet already have make sense with the things that you already have. Okay. And what's cool about this exercise as well is that you don't have to change a single thing about your current situation, or about anything that you have. You don't have to show this list to anybody. It can totally be a secret, and you do not have to take any action from it. But what's really enlightening and what's cool to see is that as you're making this list is just to see what comes up, right? And don't edit this, right? Just know and give yourself some space and freedom that you can literally tear this up, burn it, whatever, destroy it if you want. No one has to see it, but let yourself dream and just try to see what comes up for you as you're, again, going through this list and deciding, what do I love? What do I want? Because you're doing it from this place of gratitude and the gratefulness comes up, you can really allow yourself to unpack and see what may come up that I'm still dreaming and wanting to go after. And again, doesn't mean you have to go after it, but it allows you to see and look at what is, again, part of my calling. What are things that I maybe never dreamed of before that I could have? And just can be curious about why maybe that's on the list. And again, I would go big. Think of things that you never, ever, ever think are even entirely possible, but that maybe you just want to throw on the list for fun, just to see what comes up for you. And sit with them. And again, I think, from this list, you don't have to make any decisions. You can just use it to reflect, and you can just use it as a way to learn more about yourself. Okay. And so that's how we can start to really tap into like, what is our voice? What's our calling telling us? And to just be curious about it, right? When you look back on it. And that way you don't have to feel like it's either or. You don't have to feel ungrateful for what you have, and you don't have to admonish your dreams because you feel like, again, you'd have to exchange one for the other. Okay. It is not binary. It's not an either or. It can totally be an and. Okay. So give it a try. And again, there is no reason why you can't feel super grateful for all the things that you have and still dream for whatever is next in your life. And it doesn't mean you have to change a thing about it. Okay. Only if you want to. I do this exercise again with other leaders. I've done it myself, and I think it's a great practice. And if you want some help trying to unpack it, I know sometimes it can feel overwhelming when we're in a place of such accomplishment as an executive and we are in such a place of such abundance. It can feel strange and sometimes alienating to like still feel like maybe there's something more out there. And how do you determine and how do you decide for yourself what that could look like and what you want to do about it? Okay. So if that's you and you want some help with it, I'm so happy to talk about it with you. If you know somebody's in the situation, share this message with them and let them know there's somebody that can help. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. And if you want more, I know if you're listening to this on audio, there is a YouTube channel, Alicia Cowan, that you can go and watch this if you want to see me and get a little bit more from this. I am also on LinkedIn. So head on over, Alicia Cowan on LinkedIn, and Cowan Coaching LLC also there. So we share a bunch of shorter content and quick little snippets with you that is a little bit more short form than this during the week. So great to talk to you this morning and today, this afternoon, whenever you're listening. And I really appreciate you listening. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Executive Coaching Podcast with Alicia Cowan. If you're ready to have an executive coach who's ready to help you lead your team to success, then book an introductory call at aliciacowancoaching.com/call.